Now, we have a lot of options that we can avail ourselves of as we use these various virtual machines. As you can see, this left-hand column of the product, a lot of these options are available um, for many of our preferred hypervisors, as you might expect, because VMware is sort of the industry leader in this. It has probably got more features in more categories than anybody else. Um, VirtualBox and Hyper-V have kind of been playing catch up for in some ways. They handle things like time synchronization, drag and drop. Now, with some of these things like shared folders, drag and drop, um, you need something like VMware Tools installed. They all support snapshots. Um, they will all support optimized video drivers. Now, one thing that I would note here, um, this really only supports higher resolution in the virtual machine. What it doesn't get you is very high quality graphics processing. I discovered that quite by accident when I was trying to use a Kali VM to crack some hashed passwords using Johnny and John the Ripper. Um, GPUs are good at heavy duty math. That's why they're often used for things like blockchain mining, Bitcoin mining, that kind of thing, hashing things, et cetera, et cetera. So what you really need to do if you're going to generate a great big multi-million entry rainbow table, you don't really need um, the latest and greatest processor. What you need is a really good graphics card, if not a couple of them linked together, which is something you could do. The thing that this optimized video driver thing doesn't get us, those VMs don't know they have a really good graphics card under the hood, even if they do. Say, I've got an Intel Core i7. Uh, I can't remember off the top of my head what the graphics card is in here, but it's pretty good. So my physical machine might actually, because it could use the GPU directly, might have been able to crack those hashed passwords a whole heck of a lot faster than the Kali VM running John the Ripper and Johnny. It cracked some of my easy passwords very quickly. Some of my harder passwords, it literally went all night and didn't. It can also do time synchronization with the host system clock. Alternatively, if you don't want it to do that, if you've got a system, if you say, for example, you've built a big test, production grade test network, and it includes an NTP server, and you want the NTP VM doing that. Now, what you might do there is make the NTP VM tell it to talk to the host and everything else integrate to it, so that your host machine almost becomes your Stratum Zero. Mouse and keyboard integration, very helpful. Now, one thing to note here, particularly when you're working with, say, Windows Server 2012, 2016, 2019, your host machine will almost invariably intercept your Control-Alt-Delete, your three-key salute. That will cause you some problems when you're trying to log into a Windows server. A lot of other systems don't mind. You just kind of click somewhere, wiggle the mouse, drag the drag the screen up to the top until you can see your login again. Windows Server really, really, really wants the Control-Alt-Delete. So fortunately, at least Windows Workstation, VMware Workstation actually has a Control-Alt-Delete button. If you're working in ESXi or vCenter, you might have to right-click, choose Actions, go to Host, Keyboard Shortcuts, and you can actually send simulated keyboard shortcuts into the host machine. So just pay attention to that. If you're using keyboard shortcuts, make sure that your host machine is not going to get in the way. If it is getting in the way, figure out why. If there's some other program, say Intel Graphics Helper program, maybe intercepting hotkeys that prevent you from hopping sideways between terminals on a virtualized Linux box. I've seen that happen too. Now we can also let's also talk about comparing and downloading these products. let's see. So, as you're thinking about the products you want to use, think about what you need to do. Think about the platform you're going to run it on. Think about how much you can pay for it. And you have to balance these things really. Features versus cost versus requirements versus support versus familiarity. If it is in a complex program that you're not familiar with, it even if it's the one you know ultimately that you need, you may need to develop some familiarity so you can support it yourself. Another thing to think about is uh, the quality of the support that is available from the vendor. Um, if everyone you know swears by VMware's or Oracle's um, level 2 and level 3 technical support, that's a good indication that yes, if I go down this road, I can get help for things I can't figure out. One of the good things about VMware is almost all of their documentation is available online. On the other hand, um, if the people you know in this industry who've been in it for a while are all telling you don't touch product A with a 10-foot pole, again, you should bear in mind the, shall we say, the wisdom of the crowd. Um, the fact that everybody you know is swearing by or swearing at a given product is not a guarantee that it is the right product for you, because your technical expertise might be better, your platform support requirements might be different. You may not have the physical hardware to run the thing that they're all swearing by. You may not have a choice but to run the thing they're all swearing at. And in that case, you just do your best. Learn everything you can. Um, and remember, one of the things I think that our end users sometimes forget about us is that we're people too. Um, Sometimes they don't know that what we're really good at is finding new information, um, at say Googling it, and then really assessing the forum posts and the help pages and figure out, okay, this feels like my problem, this looks like my issue, let me try this, but otherwise I know, oh, by the way, I know that already isn't working, or I tried that, or anyway, what we're not naturally better at this, though some of us are. What we're good at is knowing how to find help. Now think about RAM and disk space. You really, really, really need a lot of RAM and a lot of disk space, particularly if you're going to have a lot of VMs running. Um, Now you can help yourself a little by defragging the host computer's hard drive. You can help yourself a little, or a lot really, by having multiple hard drives, as long as they're not going to do silly things like drop and come back on you. But look at your maximize your RAM if possible. Maximize your available disk space if possible. If you have to do RAID, think about RAID solutions which speed up performance. Even if redundancy is, even if you have to choose between now, if you have to choose between redundancy and performance, go very carefully through that choice. So let's actually look at some of these things. So we're actually looking at VMware Workstation 12, VMware Fusion, Hyper-V, and Oracle VirtualBox. Now, what we actually have out in the world right now is VMware 15.15. Now, the other thing to note is that some of these memory requirements are ridiculously minimal. Um, Honestly, if you're talking about running Hyper-V, that means 2 gigs of RAM for Hyper-V all by itself, if not 4. Running Windows 8, Windows 10, or even really Windows 7 with only 2 gigs of RAM, while officially possible, is completely infeasible, and you shouldn't try it. So think of these as the extra memory, the extra free memory you need um, to run the product, not the total memory of the system. You need a couple of gigs of space, a gig of space for a VMware workstation. Make sure that you take into account the number of VMs you're running. Now, if you think you might run into an issue, we can do what we call thin provisioning. VMware Fusion needs about 3/4 of a gig of memory. Sorry, 3/4 of a gig of space. Hyper-V needs 2 plus space for all the VMs. Now, one thing you can do, you can have your software running off of one hard drive, and your VM stored somewhere else in what we call a data store. In terms of downloading them, um, you can actually get them off of the VMware website, um, either free or paid. Obviously, as you might expect, the free version won't do as much. You all can also do this using on the hub. Um, you can also get VirtualBox free. Um, if you're in a Linux environment, you may actually be able to, you should be able to install the free versions of VMware and the player and possibly also Fusion and definitely VirtualBox using your um, uh, your package management system. And then finally, Hyper-V. Hyper-V can be both a client and a server. As a client, it's kind of a type 2. As a server, it's type 1. With server type 1, you definitely need a Windows Server operating system. There's actually a Hyper-V role in Server 16 and Server 2019. It runs as a service. You can use your MMCs to tie into it. Um, there is also a host version, a standalone version that doesn't have a host OS. Technically speaking, the Hyper-V version, the Type 1 Hyper-V, um, technically probably still has a server core or nano server instance running underneath it, um, supporting what is essentially its primary function, Hyper-V. And next, I'll summarize the chapter and we'll be done. And thank you for watching.